So first I'd like to just understand the room a little bit and see how many people know things about Dollar General as a company. All right, I got almost everybody. All right, now how many of you have actually shopped in our stores? Not been in them, like purchased stuff. All right, that's pretty good. That's impressive. All right, it's more than what I thought. So for the rest of you, hopefully I can get you to convert a little bit later as you go through the slides. All right, so what I'm going to share with you is a little company, a little bit about our supply chain, and then one of our key initiatives that we took on to really transform how we do things and really change the customer experience. So a little bit about the company. We're focused on value-conscious, convenience-seeking individuals, and we cover a broad section of America, both metro and rural. Although rural is really our sweet spot, and that's where we really kind of do a bulk of our business. But we've ventured into more metro areas. We're now in the boroughs of New York, so a lot of places that traditionally you wouldn't find Dollar General. In the past few years, we've expanded in that space. Over 17,500 stores. That's our official kind of PR statement. We're going to open 1,050 new stores, so you can imagine that number changes every day. So we're somewhere in the 17,800 range, and we'll hit 18,000 this year. When you look at our store footprint, we're about 7,100 prototype on the sales floor with a smallish back room of another 1,000-ish square feet. And we like to put a lot of product in those 7,100 square feet. So we'll stock about 10,000 everyday goods, another 1,000-ish temp control goods, a couple thousand DSD goods as you look at Coke, Pepsi, Frito, and some of those traditional DSD products. And then several thousand seasonal products that you'll have depending on the time of year. That flexes up and down. And that makes up the about 15,000 items that we carry in our stores every day in a 7,000 square foot footprint. The slide says 27. Laura quoted 28 distribution centers. We have 18 ambient and 12 temp control. 2 of those temp controls sit on the same campus as our ambient facility, our new kind of model, what we're calling the combo facility. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that initiative looks like for us. And a fun fact here is about 75% of the U.S. population lives within 5 miles of a Dollar General, which is impressive then when you look at kind of where we are. We're not in all the states yet. So quick trivia, anybody know what 4 states we're not in? 2 are easy, 2 are harder. The easy ones, good job. All right, anybody know the hard ones? They're more western states. Who said Montana? All right, good one. All right, we got one left. No, close. Right next to Montana, though. There you go, Idaho. All right, so those are our 4 states we're not in. Oh, you said it? My bad. I didn't hear you. All right, we'll give it to him. Sorry. All right, so those are the 4 states we're not in. Obviously, we're continental U.S. focused, so no plans to head across to either Alaska or Hawaii at this time, but we'll be in the other two continental U.S. states in the coming years. Over 159,000 employees. The bulk of those reside in our stores. Our headquarters is just 30 minutes up Highway 65 north from here, so very convenient for this event for me today. And then last year we did $33.7 billion in sales. Obviously, COVID was a strong year for us from a sales perspective, as customers were flocking to a lot of different stores to make purchases, and we took some benefit from that. We're now number 91 on the Fortune 500, and we've been on the S&P 500 since 2012. All right, another key component of the organization is our mission, and our mission is about serving others, and that takes the shape of serving our customers, our communities, our shareholders, our employees. And we have a couple of philanthropic organizations that we participate in. The one I wanted to showcase here for you today is the Literacy Foundation. And the Literacy Foundation is company funded, employee funded, and this is one I personally contribute. So I like this one. I've actually done some work with them too, reading programs at schools. But the main premise here is we help people learn how to read, get their GED, or learn English as a second language. And this whole reading concept or literacy concept was initiated by our founder, who had a 3rd grade education, so considered to be functionally illiterate, but he wanted to give back. And so this Literacy Foundation was born out of that idea and supporting that. And you can see the stats there, been around since '93, almost 200 million in donations, and we've helped more than 14 million people learn to read, get their GED, or learn English as a second language. So we're very proud of this organization and the work that they do every day. All right, so a little bit about our supply chain. And I like the purple color here. We'll have to see. That may stick, Laura, for us. So pre-COVID in 2019, we established this moniker of One Supply Chain. And the goal of that was really to bring our whole supply chain together as one. And so we use that kind of one idea, and what you can see there on the left. So it's really about how we come together as one team with one strategy and one focus. And there was some conversation earlier that I heard around how you operate in a non-siloed environment. And that's what this is all about, is while we all have some functional responsibilities within supply chain, we all come together for the greater good of the supply chain and in turn the greater good of the company. So we'll make some of those trade-off decisions and not allow the silos to win in this case. And that's really my job to kind of play that in-between role and facilitate that. So that's really the goal here. When you look at the right side, I heard the conversations around being customer-centric and customer-driven. So that's how we see ourselves. We're a customer-driven supply chain, so we think about customer all the way back as we operate. And so we've kind of always, in our graphs and our charts and everything we show graphically, we always stick the customer at the center and then put ourselves around it. And that's what you see here is the functional business units within supply chain or the segments. We have our allocation team that really handles short life cycle products, our demand management team that handles all the continuity, the everyday goods from a replen for the stores, for the distribution centers and flow of goods, our DC operations team that runs those 28 facilities that we have, MDM, master data management, and business to business. So this is all of our data around items, stores, and locations and all those intersections. And then also all the B2B communications or EDI communications that we perform in the organization, from electronic funds transfers to purchase orders to sharing data through EDI, is managed in this group. And then we segment off imports a little bit. It's not really a business unit. It resides within business units, but we do quite a bit of importing. We're number 19 on the U.S. importer list. And so there's a specific supply chain that's driven for importing. And then lastly here on the cycle is the transportation team, both global and domestic, both inbound, outbound, and that all works together in kind of one continuous process and collaborative flow. So that's kind of how we see the supply chain and how we fit into the organization. But the key points here are we try to work as one and try to manage those siloed activities, and really, like you talked about, margin impacts and P&L activity, and that's how we look at it. We make trade-off decisions between DC costs and transportation costs back and forth to help balance it, all for the benefit of what the net margin is going to be. So we can talk more about that in Q&A if you've got questions. All right, so now I want to kind of shift gears and talk a little bit about our big initiative. And this one's exciting to kind of talk about because now we've completed the journey and now we're in operational mode here. We completed the expansion. And it's been a great project, a great initiative. 2.5 years of work, came in 6 months ahead of schedule. And I'll share with you some of the components and talk a little bit about some of the differences we started versus where we ended. But I'm really excited to share, all the positive results coming out of this. And even for myself, when we started this initiative, I was a little leery about it, just because looking at the previous landscape, I don't think anybody had done anything of this scale in our space, in the retail space. And so we were a little bit venturing off into some land that wasn't kind of predefined for us. So we'll go into it here. So first, it was the goals of what we wanted to do, right? So we consider ourselves a fill and trip, meaning that most of our business comes with small baskets, right? People come in and fill in things that they forgot, they needed incrementally from their big shop, whether it was at a mass, a grocery, or any kind of a larger retailer. So that's our main trip mission. And so we want to do the same thing for the perishable business, right? So we wanted to be that leading fill and trip for the product assortment that our customers want, which is important. And I'll get into some of that later. So then we said, okay, what are those 4 key goals here, right? We wanted to be cost-centric. And what does that mean? Well, we wanted to ensure that we have an improved cost to serve. And where we started this was all a DSD distributed network across the U.S. with a multitude of different distributors sourcing these goods for us. So we'll talk a little bit more about why that was complex and why it didn't give us everything from an assortment perspective. So in turn, we also on the cost side wanted to manage our initial cost of goods. Right? When you're in a direct store delivery program, a full service direct store delivery, meaning that the The delivery agent comes in, they stock the shelves, they take away any damages, they do the full service. Now we're managing that directly with the manufacturers versus a third-party agent. So that initial cost of goods, since we weren't going full service, was important. And then the other important piece was being able to control our network. We were constrained by where we could find a provider that could service a store and wherever we were in the US. And that created some of our gaps. Then you look at efficiencies. So we wanted to make sure that we had efficiencies through the whole end-to-end process. Distributed mode, we obviously have to handle, and then all your store-level processes. Then in the legacy process, we're all handled by third parties, basically end-to-end. We didn't have to do any of it, but we paid for it. So that was part of the efficiency. And then as you look at growth, and one more thing on efficiency, and I know there was a lot of conversation on the margin, so I wanted to hit here. The important part here was what was the net margin, net of all that stuff, right? As we started with our initial cost from our DSD providers fully loaded, and then what could we do through our efficiencies to drive that out, and also control some of the outputs like markdowns and damages and pricing that would erode that net margin, as all that was now 100% in our control. On the growth side, we're obviously in continued hyper growth. We're going to open 1,050 new stores today, and we're going to remodel another 1,700 and also relocate a few stores. So within that whole cluster, there's almost 3,000 projects that we have on an annualized basis. So that growth comes with expansion in this space, specifically in the temp control. So if you go into one of our newer stores, you'll see expanded cooler assortment in those stores compared to some of the legacy stores. And so this is where this comes into play. The other growth component was our marketing and how we built awareness in these markets where we enhanced the assortment, enhanced the offering, so customers knew we had that for them versus they just found out as they came into the store. And the last component here on the goals was the sales side. So we wanted to drive sales, but we wanted to do that through assortment, and that included both brand enhancements, private brand and national brand. With the prior DSD, we were constrained on the assortment the DSD provider had to offer. So we couldn't always carry the preferred brand or the #1 brand in the market. Now we can control that and also enhance our private label program, which we've done. And then we also wanted to enhance the assortment. So what items we carried were not limited to those distributors' assortments, and we went off and got the best items. All right, so that's kind of where we started, and all that led to, between the vision and the goals, to the solution that we had to self-distribute to get to these goals. Okay, so quick time lapse of our self-distribution journey. It's hard to see here. There's a lot of dots, and these are our fiscal years. So we end our fiscal year at the end of January, which is a little confusing when you see 2018, but this is actually January of 2019 when we opened our first DC in Pottsville, Pennsylvania. So that kicked off the self-distribution journey with our first 300 stores, and you can see the green dots in the Pennsylvania kind of northeast market there. So in 2019, we expanded by adding another 3 distribution centers and then over 6,100 stores. And you can see that growth expansion in those dots. And then 2020 was really our big year. During COVID, we had the largest expansion of this fresh distribution network by adding another 6 distribution centers and really filling in the landscape of our stores and servicing over 16,000. And then just this year, we've added our last 2 DCs as part of that footprint to get us to that over 17,500, which is really 17,800 right now, and then basically covering the landscape of our stores, with the exception of a small cluster of formats that we're still using third-party providers. So all this work done in 2.5 years, which, you know, when you stand back for a second and think about it, we don't spend a lot of time kind of doing that, but it's impressive, and just thinking about everything it took to get this done. And we still have a lot of work to do to continue to enhance the operation, but it's been a great initiative, and I'll show you some of those results as we go through it. So another area that we've kind of focused on as part of this transition, and obviously when you're growing self-distribution, you're going to grow transportation. So the way we have our transportation set up on the outbound side is we have dedicated carriers, and then we have our private fleet. And we took the opportunity with all these growth of these new distribution centers to grow our private fleet exponentially. And so today our DG fleet, DG drivers, is over 700 strong now, and we're continuing to grow that base. We're still leaning on third parties dedicated to help, and they still do the bulk of the work when you look at the overall network. but we're very focused on enabling fleet to be a key platform for us in the forward years. And we see this as a huge competitive advantage, cost advantage, especially as you all know, the volatility of the transportation market is not something that likely goes away. It just ebb and flows. And we're on the wrong flow of that right now. And so this helps us manage some of those costs, and we'll continue to lean forward here. And as you go through that kind of initiative work, we had to do a lot of work around organization, people. We had to do a lot of work around process, and then we had to do quite a bit of work on systems too to make sure that we had the appropriate capabilities that we needed. And so with that, we kind of put 4 key components associated with that. And the first one was speed. And the speed for us is how long does it take for us to order from the distribution center and in turn get it to the store. And we did a lot of work that down. Then the other speed component is how long does it take to order from a vendor and get it to our facilities, specifically around milk. For any of you who deal with the perishable supply chain, milk is one of the most sensitive items, and it's actually high velocity also. So you got both working for you. And so we wanted to basically shrink that timeline down on milk and be able to get it, freshest milk possible, into our facilities and into our stores. And then the last component was around how our delivery takes place. If any of you have seen this device in our stores, if you've been in there, it looks like a rolling cage with a net on the front. So we don't deliver like some folks do on pallets. We deliver in these rolling cages that we call rolltainers. You may have seen it in Europe. It's more common there. And this allows us to get product off the truck and onto the sales floor and maneuver in a small, tight quarters, and then get it to where it goes in the store and be able to still traverse the store with a rolltainer in place to help with that flow. And that's critical to our store replenishment process. Then the second segment is visibility. And we start with visibility here around our perpetual inventory to make sure we knew what we had, why we had it, and if the outputs changed. And so meaning sales changed, damages, expirations, anything we did to kind of take inventory out. And this was both at store level and in our distribution centers. And then we also equipped all of our fresh trailers or our temp control trailers with monitoring. And we're able to monitor the actual trailer and where it is. And we're also able to monitor the temp control unit for health, meaning we can monitor the cold chain, we can monitor the fuel levels and any fault codes that come back. So this allows us to kind of understand where things are and make sure we don't run into issues where we run out of fuel or we have a fault code that brings the temp down, so we can ensure that we've got proper cold chain there. All right, the third one, accuracy. So as you look at kind of the importance of accuracy here, I'll come back to perpetual inventory. A lot of what we do from a order and fulfill is based on what the perpetual inventory tells. A lot of energy on the store side to focus on perpetual inventory. Keep in mind, we shifted work, right? We had a full service DSD model where somebody would come into the store, go to the shelf, figure out what they needed, they'd place the order and then come back and deliver it, take any damages back. Now we took over that process, which meant that our store teams were now responsible for that and ensuring that all the damages, all the activity, all the rotation was all done properly. So that's where we get into some of that accuracy and that inventory both at DC and stores. We also had to manage cooler breakdowns. Unlike a grocery store where you'll go into a back room and there's plenty of back stock, you can stock pallets, there's plenty of room. Our typical back stock is a 2-door reach-in cooler and a 2-door reach-in freezer. So if for some reason a cooler is down, they typically don't have the space to stock all that product that would be in that cooler that's down that 2-door. So we have processes in place that tell us when those coolers are down, and we will alter replenishment and not send them the product that's in that cooler until that cooler's back up, and then we'll flow the goods again. And that helps us just ensure we don't end up with damages or goods that we can't store anywhere. And then the tools obviously are important. Systems are important here. So we had to enhance our replenishment systems to account for some of these changes in process on the perishable nature of the product. We had to enhance our store level handhelds to allow them mobility in their transactions in aisle. And then we also had to enhance our BI tools and KPI reporting to ensure that we were capturing those key components that were important to this business. All right, so when we put all that together and go through the 2.5-year journey, we can check all these boxes and excited to report we're seeing the sales improvement. We're able to adjust the assortment. We're now carrying the number 1 item and not the number 2 or number 3 because the distributor carried that item. So that's helping us on the sales front. We've enhanced our private label offering in this space. which is also helping on the sales front. And so sales are growing, and we're happy to report that. Profits are also improving. So when you take all the costs that it takes us to process from end-to-end, distribution, transportation, all the outputs of damages and everything else, we are doing this cheaper than our DSD providers were doing it for us in the full service model. And part of that sales improvement is also coming from improved in-stocks. So we have better on-shelf availability, which is allowing the items to sell accordingly and satisfy those customer needs. I mentioned the assortment piece, and this is one that I would say we thought about but didn't really value all the assortment possibilities that were here. And so I think this has been a big unlock for us. And the last one here is the strategic enabler, which is really the way we think about this supply chain specifically. It's a platform for us to do things now. So now we can send temp control products and manage them, and maybe not products that you would traditionally think about that require temp control, but for any of you that are involved with candy or chocolate candy supply chains, as an example, we have to do a lot of work to protect chocolate candy during the summer months through our ambient supply chain. So we have a strategic enabler now that we can process through here. We haven't done it yet, but it's in the back of our minds. Not to mention, as you look forward into what else we can do here with this specific supply chain, and I'll mention some of that a little bit later. Okay, so we talked about kind of the next steps around assortment. So there's still a lot of work being done on assortment now that we have ultimate flexibility. We also have scale now, where now we have buying power and we're buying as one entity, even though we're distributing to many. So we're able to get scale through some of these private label initiatives and get into these categories that we traditionally had to carry a branded item only. Now we have a complementary private label offering, which reaches back into what we talked about from a profitability perspective. Everybody knows private brand drives tremendous amount of profitability, and if you can get the right profile and get the customers to enjoy that item, you can have a good balance of your needs to be done on the increased assortment. And we're also looking at different avenues like produce. We have a goal to have produce in over 10,000 stores, and this fresh distribution fulfillment network will be part of that answer to help us scale that across the network. We're always focused on cost reductions and cost improvements, and a big component here, what we do in the distribution and the trans group, and fleet will continue to be a key component of that for us as we grow that business. On the distribution side, you think about starting up a distribution center for any of you that have done that, getting your employees ramped up, getting them productive, and the time it takes. So a lot of these DCs are still in ramp-up mode, and they're still in productivity improvement mode. So we'll continue to see improvements there on the productivity side, and we'll get more efficient. But that process also goes back upstream into how we order and how we interact with our suppliers, and then downstream into the store side and what they do from an efficiency perspective. And the last component here is the partnership segment. So we did some things, and obviously you with short-dated product, you have a lot more risk of damages and expirations, or short-dated merchandise that you really can't send out, but it still has dating on it. So what do you do with that? So we've developed a couple of partnerships here on the, let's say, the expired but still reasonable product. We worked with companies that recycle that material and actually use it in animal feed and other products, and so they call it upcycle the expired goods or the dated goods. And we're talking about stuff that would have expired today and so forth. We're also working with Feeding America on our close dated product, and so we're able to, instead of damage out and fill a dumpster, we're giving all that food to Feeding America and letting them kind of foster it out through their partnerships, local partnerships and food banks. And those typically have a few days of life left, but enough to where somebody who needs it can take it and consume it in that short amount of time and still have good product. So we're working through these alternate paths to really manage how much we put into landfills. We know we're going to damage some product out based on inaccuracies and issues we have and breakdowns, but what can we do with that product so you don't just throw it away and try to do some good with it. And with the partnership with Feeding America, we also donated $1 million to them to help establish some of these programs and in some of these more rural communities where they may not have a footprint, but we do. And so this is a solve for both what we do at the distribution centers and also the stores. So a program to kind of really reuse that product instead of just putting it into dumpsters. So that's kind of my whole spiel. I know we'll have some time for Q&A too, but I wanted to at least give you a preview into some of the exciting things we've done specifically with Fresh, and we've got a lot more. Hopefully we'll continue to leverage this network and get more out of it. But thank you for listening.
So I'm going to ask you to stay on the stage, and we're going to do some Q&A. But I want to do a little reflection, Tony. I had the great opportunity to go work with the Dollar General leadership team. And often when I go into a room with the leadership team, I feel like all the oxygen sucked out of the air. Like everybody's like, what you going to tell us? And we know the answer. This team was so humble and so caring. And when we went out to the warehouse, they knew the people's names. And they talked to a person who was receiving a truck about a particular supplier whose code dates didn't scan, and they talked about equipment that didn't work well. I mean, it was just a very caring, humble environment. And so when we talk about leadership and we talk about serving people, I think Dollar General is a great case study. So let's have some mics run, and I think Peter has his hand up. Anybody else? Deanna has her hand up. Peter, is it hot?
It is now.
Okay, great.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that presentation. So one of the things I saw on that was you're hiring 50,000 people, coming into, I'll call it the company at that point. So how do you think about, I'll call it the upskilling or the reskilling or the new skilling of that entire group, as it relates to technical training, right? You have to operate this. The level of automation that you're investing in within the warehouses. So just curious on your perspective. We're talking about the future of work this afternoon. So again, how do you think about the competencies for those 50,000 people?
So let's focus on competency. And then I want to ask you, how are you getting people with this labor shortage? So let's talk first about competency. How do you build competency?
Automated. So today's process is very people-centric for us. And if you look at the evolution in our distribution network, the last 9 DCs we built are limited automation, or limited, even if you'd say conveyors or automation, limited conveyors is an example. Our older DCs relied a lot more on conveyance to move product within the facility. So that was kind of, call it Gen 1. Actually, Gen 1 was our first DC. I'll put that off to the side. Gen 2, Gen 3. And so now we look at what's coming up next, and the pressures on wage rates as you look at the $15 minimum wage and what compression that creates for a distribution employee. And then you look at the availability of talent in the market to do the harder work of working in distribution, lifting cases and lifting a lot of pounds on a daily basis. So we're now evolving to our Gen 4 prototype, which will include automation. Now, for us, automation won't be lights out type of automation, but we'll take segments of the warehouse and automate those functions that we think can help us manage both labor and manage productivity and get to that result. So we're rethinking that in the distribution segment as we go into next year and what that'll look like for us. The bulk of that 50,000 that was quoted is sitting in the stores, right? Our supply chain all in is about 14 when you include our distribution centers and our headquarter folks and our fleet team that make up that. But so we're looking at both the distribution kind of competencies and really more so the employee activity doesn't change much, right? If you think about technology there and you move from a traditional pick on a material handling device to a goods to person solution where someone just stands here and things come to them, they're still picking out of a tote or out of something. They're just not physically moving. So a lot of that's not different for the hourly employee, but what is different is for the management team that manages that, how they deploy call it the picking assets, the reload assets, and those kinds of things. So that's where we're really focused on as we introduce automation. What does the management team look like, and what do they need to do differently? And then we're doing the same thing in our headquarters, and as we talk about automation within our systems to replenish as an example. So we just transitioned over to an AI machine learning based replenishment system from DC to vendor. And that replaced a lot of our manual forecasting processes because now we have a learning forecast that takes care of that work. So that just happened a few months ago and completed that. And we'll be doing the same thing on the Fresh network transitionally. So that's how we're thinking about more work at the office call it the headquarters, and really getting to more value add. And these folks are already analysts, they're already smart. We spend a lot of time hiring out of, call it premier supply chain colleges. So we think they already have those tools. Today we're just using them to do more, let's say, manual work. Now we'll refocus that energy on more value add and let the system do more of the manual work. So that's how we're thinking about both sides of that.
So I love the picture of a driver being able to have a pet in the cab.
Yeah.
The driver's job's a pretty lonely job, and
It is.
I think pets make the world a better place. But how are you getting workforce, right? And everybody else is struggling with getting people in stores, getting people in trucks. How are you cracking that nut?
Yeah, it's hard. I think the labor picture's hard, and it varies across the country. Harder or not as hard. I don't think anybody's going, I'm good, I got all the people I need. Like whoever that is, I don't know who they are, but don't trust them on anything they say. So we're working through that. I would tell you the tough place to compete is on pay, right? Because it's a death spiral, and everyone's giving away sign-on bonuses, and they're just adding another zero on top of it. You did 500, I'm doing 1,000. You're going to do 1,500. So we're playing in some of that also, but we're focused on driving engagement culture in our buildings to really differentiate it. Because at the end of the day, these people can go typically down the street for something different, at a different distribution center, at a manufacturing plant. And the dollars are going to be parity in a lot of cases, but what you have to offer is the level of environment you can offer inside the working environment. And we've seen that be a differentiator for us in certain parts of the country where we can win. Air conditioning in a building. You'd be surprised at how many DCs are not conditioned in some of these parts of the country. And so all but 2 of ours are conditioned. Obviously the temp control are, but then on the ambient side. So that's another offering that we kind of tout for folks, and especially when we compete with others in the area that don't have conditioned buildings in the summer. Nobody seems to care in the winter, but in the summer it's important. And then just really focus on where we can find the opportunity to be a better employer beyond pay. And that's what we try to focus on, the engagement level in the warehouses. Right now we're doing a summer send-off kind of initiative where we'll do food, drinks, snacks every other week, and we're doing kind of raffles every other week in all of our distribution centers, from TVs to sound bars, and they earn those raffle tickets through, let's say, good things that they're doing on the floor. And so supervisors and managers will just hand them raffle tickets based on things that they do. And the team really gets energized about the raffle events. I was just in one in our Clayton, North Carolina facility, and you'd be amazed how excited people get about winning a sound bar. When you look at it, it's like $200, but like they're so excited about it. So some of those little things are important, and so that's where we think we can win, is on engagement and environment.
And culture.
Yep, culture is part of that. Yep, and that's where we're trying to focus the culture in the building that mimics kind of how we expect the whole supply chain to operate.
So there's a question about, partnerships, and you referred to partnerships. Are you talking about supplier partnerships, technology partnerships, partnerships with transportation? Tell me your partnership strategy and what you've learned about winning with others through the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it crosses all of those, I would say. When you look at supply chain specifically, I mentioned our outbound process between distribution centers and stores is a dedicated component, and then we have our private fleet. So we have a small nucleus of providers, and that's a partnership there we have. And it varies across the providers, but it's a small group. So we have a high level of dependency on them to perform, and they likewise also to keep their folks employed in the dedicated basis. So those conversations and those strategies are happening every day and every week with them. And that's, I would say, one of our tightest, because it is such a small nucleus and it's dedicated and it's a specific operation. And so then you look at kind of what we've done on the technology side. We have one base solution within our supply chain that handles all forecasting, replenishment, master data, and that kind of end-to-end fulfillment process. And I mentioned that in the Fresh initiative, but they were one of our key providers to bring solutions to the table to help us, deal with some of the manual processes, deal with some of the differences in how you treat milk versus how you treat a box of Cheerios, and those kinds of things. So those became critical partnerships through that. We also got some consultant help as part of that initiative, and that was also a critical partnership. And then you look at our suppliers, and that's really, we spent a lot of energy during COVID around the supplier relationship and understanding what was allocated, how much we could get, and how do we divvy it up amongst our need internally, ensure we're getting our fair share, and all those good things. And we have very strong relationships with our suppliers. We segment our suppliers into clusters: strategic, connected, enhanced, and then transactional, which we have a lot of. So we have a smaller cluster of this kind of high-end segment where we spend the most time collaborating and discussing and planning. And that helps us kind of manage when things don't go well, because no one likes to get the call like, hey, I don't know who you are, but why are you calling me all of a sudden? So we try to establish all those relationships in advance to where we can actually get things done versus going through the intro and trying to manage it in the moment when they're getting thousands of calls from everybody wanting to know where their toilet paper is. And so those are some of the tighter relationships we have to help us through that, which helped us navigate through COVID. I mean, we had outages during COVID. I saw plenty of pictures of the paper section where not even one roll of toilet paper existed. And so we worked with our nucleus of suppliers to get flow in as quickly as possible, and then get it out to the stores as quickly as possible. But all those are important, not just during kind of times of need or distress, but you really have to build those in good times. That way, when you're in bad times, you've already got the connections. You know who's at the top. I don't have to go to the P&G sales rep. I can just go to the top of P&G North America supply chain and have a conversation with them around what's happening and what can we do. And that doesn't happen in time of distress. It happens in, call it, good times.
My observation in working with a lot of your suppliers is that you do more carrots than sticks than other retailers. I've watched you have kind of, celebrations with your suppliers, reward systems. Talk a little bit about building that culture.
Yeah, and I would tell you, it depends on who you talk to, but we do have some sticks also. So I'll talk about the carrots, and I'll share kind of what we do on the stick side. But your
sticks are smaller. I mean, some of the sticks in retail right now are pretty hefty.
Yeah. I think there's a varying degree of people's financial sticks that they're using.
Yeah.
All right. So on the carrot side, we have in this segmentation of our suppliers, we monthly send out a scorecard and let them know how they're performing on our business, so they can see kind of performance and see force rank amongst their peers. So that gives them an idea how they're performing on a monthly basis. We also annually do a set of supply chain supplier awards. So we'll hand out 5 awards annually, and that event's coming up at the end of the month here, where we have an annual supply chain summit. We'll reward and acknowledge the folks that kind of did really great during the year. And then we also showcase some of our suppliers and some of the specific things that they're doing to enable it. Kind of like what Laura does, as she shares kind of, here's this company and here's what they do. We do the same thing on the supplier side. Here's vendor A, here's the thing that they did to drive OTIF during the year, just to kind of share the wealth. We also have done, and we didn't do it the past couple years because of COVID, but pre-COVID in 2019, we were doing quarterly, call it, summits with our key suppliers, and we basically do 10 suppliers that we bring in, and we have a collaborative discussion between them and then between us, and talk about things that we're working on and things that are upcoming, and call it an advisory group. We talk through kind of opportunities there. And so I would say that's the carrot world, and daily collaboration at various levels, monthly, quarterly, and then annual kind of planning cycles on some of the larger vendors. And then on the stick side, we do have a compliance program that expects on time and in full and everything associated with the freight flow and all that kind of stuff. And I think to Laura's point, there's varying degrees of these programs. We did do quite a bit of waiving of those during last year based on all the circumstances, and gave vendors passes on that to help alleviate the pressure there. But those are tough programs, right? Because they see it as a complete carrot. They don't see the benefit of it. And so we have a lot of conversations with them around what can they do to drive that down. And really what it comes down to is on time and in full. And so if you can get to the good on time and in full, then your compliance charges will be in check. If you have horrible on time and full, you'll have high compliance charges. And so we typically work that angle to tell them why they're there. And there's an admin burden for us to not get product when we want it. And there's also the equivalent of availability that is also impactful. So that's how we treat call it the balance of the carrot and the stick.
Well, I was working with a supplier, and their deductions, which a lot of retailers are slapping a lot of deductions, were about 97% other guys, and their performance wasn't any different to you. But I appreciate your more balanced carrot and stick, because deductions can be 20, 25 million for many companies today. Tony, question off the live feed. Supply chain universities and people that are providing training, where do you go to recruit, and any advice about building those kind of programs?
Yeah. So I built our recruiting program back in 2012. And so we did a lot of studying around what schools we should partner with and where do students typically want to go when they get a job from what school. So what we learned there is you don't just want to go spread yourself and go to a bunch of universities or go down the list and go, I'm going to go to the top 5 universities. Because a lot of times those folks in that Northeast don't want to leave the Northeast. So there is some regional activity that we learned out of that. And also we wanted to ensure that the universities we partnered with, we could be a bigger fish in that pond of recruiting versus being a small fish in a huge pond of recruiting. So all that research led, interestingly enough, we didn't go to Tennessee, or University of Tennessee, Knoxville first. We actually went to Auburn University first. And so we've been with the Auburn program now since 2012, and it's been very lucrative for us from a talent perspective. Subsequently, we did go to University of Tennessee, and so now we really get our large percentage of our folks that come into our organization between Auburn and the University of Tennessee. Now, fast forward to today, and there's a lot more schools expanding their supply chain degree programs, and everyone seems to want to get a piece of that pie. And here, even locally, Middle Tennessee State, which is right down the road here, is also instituting a supply chain degree program that we're involved in. And also here in Nashville, Belmont University is also initiating a supply chain degree program. So these are sprouting up a lot more. And so more opportunity for us. We're engaging with both MTSU and Belmont now as in the infancy of that program to help us recruit. I would also tell you we enhanced our internship and made it a co-op. And it's a 6-month event versus a 10 or 13-week event. And that's made a huge difference for us. Huge difference on both sides, because they actually get something on their resume that's tangible, because in that 6-month co-op, we're actually having them do the job, just scaling it down for them. And so when they leave, they'll have actually done the same job that our analyst that we would hire out of school does, or in our transportation team. And our goal is to hire them, so we now have 6 months of experience. When they come back after their semester at school, we bring them back and they hit the ground running, and the onboarding is quick. And so we've done a lot of that, shifting away from the traditional summer internships to 6-month internships, which a lot of the schools are supporting through flexibility on what they offer additionally and how much credit they get to help with the graduation cycle and not push them into that full 5th year. And it's also a lot more accepted now amongst kind of the parents that are paying for this too, because they realize the value of that work besides the internship. So that's what we're doing.
There's a real talent shortage, though, that's starting around data and analytics and the use of these tools. How do we build that base? Because, I'm hearing from the technologists, 30 to 40% shortage in people that are available to do this work, competition around the evolution of analytics, and advice for universities or people to train either inside the organization, or because you've done a great job on analytics. Any advice? Yeah,
and I have this conversation with Auburn, and I had the same thing with Belmont and MTSU. And what's interesting is you're also seeing the rise of the business analytics degree. And a lot of schools now are going after that. And all of my advice to them was marry the two together in some way or another, either the minor here, the collateral, whatever you want to call the alternate. So if they're a business analytics, supply chain minor, collateral, supply chain degree, business analytics, if you can do that, that becomes a little bit of the perfect employee for what we're looking for. And I'm sure some of you also would feel that same way. And having those two components. And so I think the schools are now getting the value of business analytics within supply chain and tying that together, depending where that program resides in the schools. But that's been my conversation with them. And if we can find those folks, and we've hired both sides of that, the business analytics major and the supply chain major with the minors. And those folks are coming in with that kind of insight and awareness, and they understand how to address data. The challenge you get into on the data side, and you've probably seen this, is half the battle is knowing where the data is, how to find it, and how to structure it. And then the other half is taking it and going, okay, here's what this tells me, versus here's the report. Like, you got to get them to the insights piece of it. And I think that the good programs are doing both. They're kind of helping them understand how data is structured and how to put it together. And then they're also helping them, don't just throw it on a spreadsheet and send it to your boss. Take the insights and say, here's what I've seen, here's what I see. And again, you're not going to be 100% right, but at least you get to the insight side of that.
Thank you so much. Let's give Tony a hand.
Thank you.